Just start anytime. Yes. Good morning, Commissioners, and I want to welcome you to another one of our budget workshops for fiscal year 14-15. And we've had a series of these workshops, and at one of them, the discussion centered on the cuts that we have made over the last 8 or so years, and making sure that we're aware of, and the public is aware of, the cuts and strategies that we have used to balance our budget over the last several years as we go into this budget season. So we want to have a specific workshop to present reductions and efficiencies that each of the departments have made over the last number of years. Byron, you want to open us up here?
Good morning. As we embark on this third work session that is in keeping with the direction the mayor gave us to engage City Council early and often with preparations for development of the fiscal year 15 budget. In addition to the work sessions, Rebecca and I appreciate the time that each of you have spent with us in the individual briefings over the past month. And indeed, we have also listened and heard your comments, and you'll see some of those thoughts reflected as we move forward. Today, this session, which in fact is in response to some of the feedback you gave to get more information about level of service and expenditures, the use of expenditures, will certainly demonstrate that. And so today we will provide you an overview of each department in each office. You'll get an opportunity to see the services provided, opportunity to get a better appreciation of the cost savings, reductions, the efficiencies that the departments have utilized and put in place to provide the level of service. And most important, I believe you will have an opportunity to draw a direct nexus between the resources the citizens have entrusted the city and the level of services that we provide. You have before you a notebook that provides the presentations for each department and the order. The first sheet in front of tab 1 gives you the order for the day, or the agenda. And so as you see, after the introduction, then CFO Rebecca Sutton will provide an overview of the history of our expenditure cuts and establish the challenge before us. And then the presentations will be in the order that you see, which we start with economic development, families, parks and recreation, and public works before the lunch. And admittedly, it is squeezing a lot in. We acknowledge that and recognize that. I think it's a lot of information. We hope to at least give you a sense, kind of hit some of the highlights. Obviously, staff was always available to go in more detail and follow up with you as you desire. Then after the lunch break, we return with police, fire, venues, another break, and then housing, community development, executive offices, Office of Business Financial Services, and then move into the wrap-up and conclusion. And then at that point, for whatever policy direction council provides, council discussion and policy direction. So that explains the departmental reviews, and then the what's next part of it is, and then after the conclusion of Rebecca's presentation, we'll start with the department presentations. And as I mentioned, our goal is to provide you a better platform, or a platform for policy direction as we then move towards preparing the final budget for fiscal year 15. So to start, of our CFO, Rebecca Sutton.
Thank you, Byron. Mayor and Commissioners, good morning. What I want to do this morning is to give you an understanding of the history of our budget and financial management of the general fund budget over the last 14 years. This is going to show you how this came about, how all of our budget adjustments were done through this 14-year period. In 2002, there were reductions of 28 public works positions and an additional 12 police and 18 firefighters. In 2003, 164 positions, which were non-sworn, were eliminated, and we added 5 police and 18 firefighters. In 2003-04, we added 13 firefighters. In 2004-05, 8 police and 7 civilians, most of which had to do with the opening of the Rosemont and College Park community centers. We also eliminated 2 non-sworn positions. In 2005-06, 9 non-sworn positions were added, mainly in the area of economic development. As you know, during that period, things were going pretty fast, and so as a result, there was additional personnel that was needed in that area. In 2006-07 was the initial year of the Public Safety Initiative, and in that we had a public safety capital program. We added 32 firefighters and 27 police officers. And the following year, another 27 and 32 as well. In 2009 was the first year, the first indication of the economic downturn, and in that we had service level reductions. In the following year, we eliminated 197 non-sworn positions and had additional service level reductions. We'll look at those service level reductions in just a moment. And then in 2011, we had an additional 119 non-sworn positions eliminated and additional service level reductions. In 2012, we self-funded the health insurance fund to gain or to reduce our expenses associated with health insurance. And in the last 2 years, we've done across the board spending reductions through a reduction methodology that we have after the budget's adopted. Well, if you summarize all of that, our reductions were 508 non-sworn position cuts, service level cuts and efficiency, and then across the board cuts were all in place for that period. And then in the additions, we had 79 police additions, 113 firefighter additions, and 18 non-sworn additions. And after 2009, when we had the downturn in the economy, cuts came from non-sworn when needed, and after 2009, our sworn strength was maintained through cuts to non-sworn, transport fees, and awarded grant revenues, which then allowed us to maintain all of our police and fire strength through that time period. In words, in 2009, we cut holiday bonuses, public works and FBR landscaping, business incentives. In 2010, 197 civilian position deletions, technology management contract reductions, OPD overtime and lineup pay, public works equipment and landscaping, code enforcement board up services, FPR mowing, pool hours and athletic supplies, community organization funding, OFD vehicles and special teams pay. In 2011, 119 civilian position deletions, fleet replacement reduction, CIP contribution reduction, OPD attrition. In 2012, risk premium, self-insured health funding. In 2013, additional attrition. And in 2014, additional attrition. So this is essentially the history of the cuts that we have made in both people and services. And I think that an interesting fact is that in 2001-02, we had a total of non-sworn employees of 2,151. 2,151. In 13-14, we have non-sworn employees of 1,793. And essentially, if you look at the ratio to population, we had 87 residents per employee in 2001-02. We now have 139 residents per employee, per non-sworn employee. So I think...
Commissioner Ortiz, did you have a...
No, I'm sorry. This must have pushed about. No.
Okay.
I apologize
Sorry
for
about
that.
Okay. So I think that demonstrates essentially that we have gone through 14 years of creating efficiencies, of identifying positions that perhaps could be eliminated to save our taxpayers money. If you look at it in numbers, this slide shows you all of the cuts and all of the lasting impressions that these cuts have made through the years. Essentially, across the top is our budget preparation year and the benefit that we got from all of the cuts for that budget preparation year. Down the side are the years in which those cuts were made. And down at the bottom are total and cumulative amounts. But I think if you go all the way to the right-hand corner, you'll see that there's $379 million that has been saved over this 14-year period from the cuts and the adjustments that were made to both services and people. And I guess the next question is, what does it mean to taxpayers? Well, the cumulative savings, as we said, for all the cuts that have been made equal $379 million. That's almost a full year's general fund budget. Secondly, the savings from 2001 to 2014 with a homestead with a taxable value of $150,000 would total $3,158 total saved as a result of those reductions. And for this year alone, we're avoiding an additional ad valorem tax rate of $3.22 on the 565 we already have to have funded those cut services, those cut people over that time. And that is a savings this year of $483 on that $150,000 taxpayer. So I wanted to do this to give you an understanding of the impacts of what we've already done. And I think that as you look at all of our services and that sort of thing as you go through the day, you can know that from an efficiency perspective, while I guess theoretically you can always find one more dollar that you could save. And I think that we do that each year. I think you have to also remember that we ask for additional savings over the top every year from our department heads who and their people who try to be as frugal as possible with the money that they have been budgeted, and to get essentially an across the board reduction through our the numbers that we take off at the end, kind of an across the board. That equates to about 4.3 to 4% of our operating expenses. So that's not an unhealthy cut for them to be able to manage to, and that happens all the time. So I think, I just wanted all of you to understand the impacts of everything that has come to now, the things that have come before. This year, we have gotten our best estimate from the property appraiser, and I'm now able to present to you a range of where we are at this particular point in time. Why is it a range? Well, it's a range because we still do not have a final tax roll, or a preliminary tax roll on which we're supposed to budget, and that comes at the end of June. We do not have estimates from our state government, which does a lot of the estimating for state sales tax, for municipal revenue sharing, and some of our other taxes, and that usually comes in the latter part of June. So I'm leaving this at a range, and so the difference between revenues and expenses today, after our initial budgeting process and budget balancing process, is $43 to $53 million. Now, we have reduced that by that 4.5% across the board expense cut for departments to manage. We have proposed to move some of the CIP transfer to CIP fund balance and gas tax so that we can move that total amount of CIP back to our $9.5 million that we've had in the past. We're proposing that for at least this next year, our forfeiture fund $2.5 million of our school resource officers, and that we will be coming to you later on in the summer with fee adjustments that should amount to approximately $500,000. So that leaves our remaining gap to be between $20 and $30 million, depending on how those revenue estimates come in. And at this point, we have all of the expense budgets in, and they have been reviewed, an initial review. They will continue to review and refine But we don't expect for that to change dramatically over the next month. We do hope that we will get some good news from our revenue side, and that will place us at a particular point in that $20 to $30 million. But I would like to point out, without those previous budget cuts made from 2001 to 2014 that remain in effect today, this difference would be approximately $43 million higher, or a gap of 63 to 73 million instead of 20 to 30. So anyway, with that, I think it is time to call up the first department. You're lucky day. It's going to be economic development next.
Rebecca?
Yes.
We may have a few questions.
Okay.
Commissioner Stewart?
Yeah, Rebecca, if you don't mind, if you don't mind, would you do me a favor and just go back the number of employees? You quoted something. I don't have a slide number, but after the budget history of since 2009, you quoted some figures of number of employees we had in 2001, 2002, and then the number of employees per
Yes.
population. Would you just repeat
Okay,
those numbers there?
the non-sworn employee count. Now, this is not just general fund. This is across the board. So this is, stormwater, wastewater, all of our non-sworn employees in the city is 2151
That's
in 2001-2.
Okay.
In 2013-14, in this budget year, the one we're in right now, the position count is 1793. The residents per employee number is 87.03 in 2001-2 and 138.72 in 13-14. Our population has grown in that time frame from 187,000 roughly to 249,000 during that period.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. I just couldn't get them down fast enough. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Thank you. And I don't know if I should address this now or address it later when Chief Mina comes in, but in looking at your numbers for sworn, back in 2008, do you have the numbers of how many police officers we had?
I don't have that with me right now, no.
Okay. Right. I just want to know, because I know that later on we're talking about attrition, and I don't know if through attrition we also reduce the amount of police officers that we have.
We do not reduce the authorized strength. The authorized strength has been stable
743.
it's been stable since that time. Chief Mina is the best one to talk about.
Okay.
What he has on the street and some of the turnover issues and that kind of thing.
The same thing with the firefighters. Is it
True with the
similar
firefighters
situation?
as
Okay.
well. Mm-hmm.
All right. I'll wait until then. Thank you.
All right, let's start with economic development. Brooke, you're up.
Good morning. Let's see. Is it all together? Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as possible so I can leave as much time for my fellow comrades. Please stop me at any point if you have any questions. The Economic Development Department reviews all development for the city of Orlando, and our goal is to create a vibrant, livable city with a diverse and balanced economy. We have, within the Economic Development Department, 6 divisions, and blessed to have a very talented staff managing, each of these divisions. We have currently 1 vacancy within our Transportation Planning Division, hopeful that we can help to meet part of our attrition goal through this. Staffing levels. In 2001, 2002, we had a total staffing level of 170. Currently, we have 179 employees within the Economic Development Department. I'll point out that on the bars at the very end of this chart, we have broken down permitting so that you can see general fund permitting employees as compared to the building code enforcement fund, which we refer to as the building fund. We have several cost centers within the Economic Development Department. We have general fund as well as non-general fund cost centers, including Downtown Development Board and Community Redevelopment Agency, as well as the Building Code Fund. We rely on our general fund to fund our operations, with the exception of the Community Redevelopment Agency, Downtown Development Board, and permitting. As far as the Building Code Fund is concerned. We also have general fund permitting, and this generates revenue through our permitting and planning fees. In addition, we have business tax receipt accruals. In this chart, you can see just a comparison of new development in the city of Orlando in 2009-10 versus 13-14. In 9-10, we had the benefit of the economic boom and that new development coming on our tax rolls. So you can see there's a big difference in 9-10 versus 13-14, though we are starting to see an increase. We have, in addition to general fund, we also have our special funds, as we mentioned earlier. Our total budget within economic development, including the CRA, is approximately $51 million in 9-10 and $57 million in 13-14. This chart shows a comparison of the breakdown for the various divisions and areas within economic development. Our EDV, what is shown as our non-departmental, these are mainly our QTI agreements and any special agreements that exist, and that is roughly $15.7 million for 13-14. This chart depicts our expenditures versus our revenue over fiscal year 9-10 through 13-14. You'll see an increase in expenditures over that time frame, mainly due to a debt service of $1.2 million. Look at the next one. This chart shows our business tax receipt revenue as well as our permitting general fund revenue. So again, these are monies that we collect for soil testing and engineering inspections. You'll see that the revenue has decreased slightly over 9-10 to 13-14 in permitting for both of those areas. Real quickly, I wanted to just cover our key accomplishments and our service deliveries. This chart shows different levels of activity that we use as our economic indicators for planning, permitting, and code enforcement. I think what's important to point out is that in 2001, 2002, again, we had 170 employees. In 13-14, we have 179. Which is very poignant when you look at the increase in activity over that time frame in the permitting inspection area, as well as in our various caseloads, including permits. We're going to go through our programs and services just to highlight the activity levels within each of the divisions. City planning is currently organized into 3 studios. Comprehensive planning, land development, and community planning, and they coordinate development review with various departments and agencies. Really nothing that we do in the Economic Development Department is done alone. We work very closely with all of the city departments. This chart shows, again, activity levels 01-2 through 13-14. We've had a population increase that's significant over that time, and the per-person caseload has been affected by that. We do have mandated and regulatory required services. We support 9 boards and committees, many of which are citizen-driven boards. We also are responsible for permit case review and compliance with our land development code, as well as special ordinances and special district standards. We do all of the population and employment projections for the city, and we supply that data and information to other community organizations, and also coordinate with other agencies here locally. Quality of life. We have enjoyed working on what we call small area vision plans over the past several years to really focus on our neighborhoods that make this city so strong. In addition, we do special land use studies, and again, do a lot with other community organizations. Now I'm going to go into code enforcement. Their role is pretty simple, and that's to protect the health and safety and welfare of the citizens of Orlando. They also operate the Orlando Stops red light program. They have seen their calls for service increase significantly, and generally as the economy declines, calls for service go up. So as our economy is on the rebound, we hope to see this number start to decline some. And our calls since 2009 are up 58%. They also have mandated regulatory required services, including enforcing property maintenance standards within the Land Development Code, and they also have quality of life services, so ensuring that our neighborhoods are safe and that blighting influences are minimized, and improving public safety through our red light camera enforcement program. Real quickly, the Orlando Stops program, citations issued in 9-10, around 31,000, and 13-14, 34,000. This program has been very successful from a safety perspective, and these are just some of the safety measures that we thought would be of interest to you. 75% decrease in the number of violations issued at the Conroy and Vineland Road intersection. What this tells us is that the program works. It starts to change behavior in a positive direction. In addition, 91% of the vehicles issued a red light violation have not received a second one.
Mayor,
Commissioner Stewart.
I don't have that sheet. That's a really important sheet. Just as a reminder.
Okay, I apologize for that. We'll get that
That's
to
okay.
you if
Yeah,
it was
just,
not in your book.
those are the kind of figures that we've been asking for. Like,
None of us have it.
We don't.
Okay. And also on that, while we go back to that, more than 50 times has the video footage been requested by law enforcement for the use in criminal investigations. Transportation planning, they focus on 4 key areas: alternative modes planning, fiscal planning, current planning, and long-range planning. Key accomplishments, they have secured $35 million in grants for transportation projects. In addition, $35 million in impact fee credits and development-related escrow accounts. Division highlights, I'll go through these quickly. Gertrude's Walk, $1.2 million secured, and you can see the before and after there. Our state strategic intermodal system, Sly Boulevard and Columbia Street improvements. The East-West Bus Rapid Transit System, $7.2 million, and the Paramore Bus Rapid Transit System, $13 million. The East-West just recently became operational. Amtrak Assessment and Rehab, $3 million for that. Florida Hospital, Orlando Health reimbursements, $4.88 million. Colonial Overpass. In addition, they also have mandated regulatory required services involving our land development code. Do a lot with community involvement and our city transportation modeling. Permitting services, they are organized into 3 sections: customer service, plans review, and inspections. They focus a lot of time on pre-development meetings and pre-submittal meetings. Our goal is always to get our clients to a yes and get them through the process as quickly as possible. They issue permits as well as business tax receipts, perform inspections. Our current review time right now is 5 days for residential and 15 days for commercial development. And we have seen our review time start to tick back up. Hence the reason why we came to you this past week with the request for outside services. Visitors to permitting services. This is good news for us. The foot traffic in permitting services is on the rise. We've seen a 21% increase in the level of activity from people coming in from 2010 to 2013. Again, a sign of the improvement in the economy. Business tax receipts is also growing. What that means is that people are opening businesses and continuing to operate businesses. So we've seen an increase from 9/10, 13/14, and this represents approximately $7 million in revenue to the general fund. Permits issued increased 58.8%, and non-building code related permits have increased by 60% from 2010 through 2013. Our inspection level activity has increased by 81% from 2010 to 2013. A little bit of humor in this photo, but in permitting services is extremely important because they recognize things that need to be changed to comply to code so that you don't end up in this situation.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry to interrupt. I've seen how you pointed out how the visitors permitting and all these different things have increased, but what do you have the economic impact that it has produced, that increase in the permitting and the different permitting issues and the general, the inspections also? You have the amount of, the actual amount that the increase has produced in permits issued?
In permits, in the funds?
Yes.
Trying to find the best. What is that? The easiest.
Commissioner, just for clarification, you're talking about revenue produced or expenditure? Yeah.
Yes, revenue.
We do have that. That's right here.
So we're going to go back to. So we've seen an increase in the revenue on the general fund side of permitting. Again, that's different than the building code side of permitting. So that increase, it was $12.9 million in 9/10, and that has actually declined to 11.4. I think what you're trying to get at, though, is our permitting activity on the building code side is where we've seen the increase.
Well, I want to see what's been going on.
Yeah, let me give you a breakdown because it's not clearly shown here. Business Development Division. The Business Development Division was actually reinstated in 2013 when we went through the reduction in force several years ago. The Business Development Division was actually eliminated and rolled the responsibilities of that division rolled into the director's office. And so again, that was reinstated in 2013. They work with our entrepreneurs and our business owners to expand and diversify our local economy. They also run the Main Street program and really focus on 5 key areas: digital media, other targeted industries, manufacturing, life sciences, the development of our urban core, as well as our neighborhood commercial districts. In 2013, we have approved, thanks to your leadership, 24 businesses for incentives, 970 jobs created, and $171 million in capital investment proposed, most of which we hope will end up on our tax rolls. Each dollar invested is expected to return $78 in capital investment. We also manage, through the Business Development Division, funding agreements with 9 economic development organizations totaling $1.1 million. And this is a breakdown of that funding. As you can see, the various organizations that we fund, BBIF, the Black Business Investment Fund, and HBIF are the two that have initials there. And these organizations are set up to provide technical assistance and loan programs and do things that the city is not necessarily in a position to do. And we've seen great benefit to our local entrepreneurs as a result of these programs. This highlights the impact of our small business facade program as well as our business assistance programs. So you can see the return on investment and the number of agreements. In 2009, 2010, the business assistance program was frozen, and it was reinstated the following year. This chart highlights the impact of our Orlando Main Street program. You'll see the capital investment within our Main Street program has grown. In the Qualified Target Industry Refund Program, you'll see on the return on investment, we're still leveraging significant capital investment for each city dollar provided. They also are responsible for leveraging grants, Publix Road Fund, as well as a grant for the Orlando City Soccer project for their road improvements, as well as the USTA. Real quickly, I just want to cover some of our, what we would consider to be vulnerable programs and the impact on level of service. Our vision plans, should we see these be reduced, will result in fewer opportunities for structured citizen-led change within our neighborhood districts. Special studies, we do a lot of these studies where we evaluate conditions and opportunities for improvement within specific areas. Lot cleaning and board ups could result in increased blight from overgrown lots and safety hazards. Orlando Stops program, should we see cuts to that, potential increased safety hazards at intersections. Economic development organization funding, impacts of potentially reducing opportunities for the city and region. Business assistance and facade programs, our business owners have really come to rely on this and could possibly lead to not being able to open, expand, or reinvest in their businesses. Main Street program is also at risk. Neighborhood business districts may not flourish to the level that they are today, and our nonprofit impact fee assistance program. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, questions of Brooke? Mr. Stewart?
Brooke, and maybe can cover later on, but I guess really what I'm trying to understand, along with the same thing that Commissioner Ortiz asked, I'm looking at business tax receipts. And I guess I'm looking at the overall specific revenue impact. So the question, I mean, I would start with represent $7 million in revenue for the general fund. So the question is, how is that calculated? Is that calculated just on total fees that are collected one year compared to another, or is it calculated on a formula of fees we expect to collect? Yeah, business tax receipts. A increase from 4.5, and that 4.5 represents $7 million. I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, no, it's fees collected and returned to the general fund.
Okay. So the 4.5 equals $7 million. The math, from the math standpoint, 4.5% equals a $7 million.
Yes.
Okay, there's 7 million there. That's the private investment figure? No, that's not it.
I am failing to find what chart you're on.
Okay, I'm back about 10 or 12 slides on the business tax receipt slide. Unfortunately, they're not numbered. I apologize.
Yeah, so that number is the business tax receipt number is net general revenue.
Net, okay.
Yeah. Of 7.2 in 13-14.
Okay.
And we collect our business tax receipt revenue. A majority of that is front-loaded in our budget because declarations go out in the summer for the upcoming fiscal year. So we collect most of that within the first couple months of the fiscal year.
Okay. All right.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh.
And I should add to that we're lucky that Tallahassee hasn't taken that away.
Yes.
Yeah.
But anyhow, let's talk about code enforcement, because I know you mentioned that the cases have dropped. But I'm wondering if they have dropped because of efficiency not efficiency on our part, but efficiency on our population has grown, or because we don't have enough officers to cover the amount of problems we have out there.
Let me just clarify. Our caseload is actually increased.
Okay.
So we've seen an increase in the requests and calls for inspection.
Okay.
We do expect that moving forward, we're expecting that will start to decrease hopefully in the next fiscal year as the economy continues to improve.
I got news for you. There's a big exodus coming from some countries, and they're coming this way. So I don't know if that's going to happen or not. And the reason I'm saying this is actually I'm trying to, what I'm trying to say is that we may need more. I think we already need more code enforcement officers. And so I see your numbers, and it's impressive what we have done with the amount of personnel we have, and I know they're hard workers. But I think it's time for us to take a look at code enforcement too, and see that we may have to pump up the amount of personnel we have there. But thank you. I like those figures.
Commissioner Hill?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Brooke, sometime here in the near future, because programs are really near and dear to me, and things that's going to be needed to restore certain areas in my district, that I can possibly get a more in-depth, detailed conclusion about how the preventative measures or what I can do, or reach out to other community stakeholders to possibly help prevent losing these programs.
And I think I'm actually on your calendar for either later this week or next week, and very much looking forward to it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Brooke?
Okay.
Oops, not quite off the hook. Commissioner Rings?
Darn.
Thank you, Mayor. Brooke, on the business, development programs, how they are outlined here, specifically in the small business facade program and the business assistance program. Now, do you guys really map out the whole city, and specifically how this relates to each district, on how it's up or down within the districts?
Not necessarily. The facade program, we have seen a trend whereby the facade dollars that are allocated to some commission districts get used up in totality pretty quickly. So we've seen a greater level of activity as it relates to facade program requests in several of our commission districts as compared to others. I have not mapped out the business assistance program applications to see where we've seen an increase or a decrease, but we can certainly provide that number.
Okay. And then also in your division highlights, you list the Public's road fund application. does this have anything to do with the public store or?
This is actually the Publix distribution facility, the 1 million square foot facility
Okay.
that was recently constructed in Lee Vista.
Okay. So that's how much we've invested in that particular
No,
project?
that's actually how much we secured through the State of Florida Economic Development Transportation Fund, which is a program that provides grants for road and infrastructure improvements to support job creation in the city.
Okay. And in reference to our code enforcement, and I know we've seen some decrease, but there are a lot of other areas within our districts that require some additional work from code enforcement people. So I think we're kind of missing the boat a little bit about that. And how are you guys addressing that?
We are, we've got tactical teams that are working within code enforcement. So it is no secret that we hit some areas, depending on what's going on in those districts, at certain points in time. Recently, we've been hitting some items within District 1 related to some concerns there to try to change behavior. And we do have, we have been routinely filling the positions that we have within code enforcement to ensure that, you know, we are the most efficient and effective as possible. While doing that, though, we're always trying to bring folks into compliance before they have to go before the code board, which takes a lot of cajoling sometimes, but we've seen some success there as well. But we're certainly open, you know, anytime you have issues within your district that are of concern, you know, please bring those to our attention, and we'll make sure that we're taking care of those things.
Yeah, Mike Rhodes and I, we do work very well together on these issues, and it's quite fortunate, too, to have someone like him in that position.
It's wonderful.
Because he is very understanding, and his people do follow his lead, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Brooke.
Okay.
Okay, let's move to Family, Parks, and Recreation. Lisa?
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. Okay, I'll turn your attention to the PowerPoint. Okay, first, a department overview. This is our organization chart. As you can see, I've divided into Parks Division, Recreation Division, and also pulled out our children's initiatives. So some of the presentation will separate out what we do with children from other things. And under children's initiatives are After School All-Stars, Paramore Kids Zone, and then we've also pulled out our recreation division programs that serve children. So from a financial standpoint, you'll see it under children's programs instead of under recreation division. Okay, so this is our headcount history since fiscal year 01-02. And you can see that we have had a 29% reduction in force. We are at the lowest level of staff in all these years currently. These two graphs show you the trends in terms of our headcount compared to the population in the city of Orlando. So the graph on the left, the blue line shows the increase in the population of residents of the city of Orlando, and the red line shows the number of staff in the Families, Parks, and Recreation Division. And so the chart on the right shows you the per resident head count, or the number of staff we have per resident, and you can see that going down from 0.0015 staff per resident in 2000-2002 period to 0.00079 staff per resident currently.
Is that per thousand?
Per resident. The chart on the right is per resident.
I know, but we
So
have
there's 0.0079 staff per
Move the
city
decimal
resident.
point 3 places, Commissioner. You can get the 4,000.
Yeah, that's
Okay, our primary funding sources. I broke it out into general revenue fund and then grants and then user fees. So this first is the general revenue fund, and I'm showing you numbers from fiscal year 08-09 through last fiscal year. And you can see that our general revenue allocation has gone down. It bleeped up a little tiny bit between 11-12 and 12-13, and that was for salary increases. And we have a lot of minimum wage employees, and there is a mandated increase in the minimum wage every year. So that's what that slight increase represents. You don't see a comparison here between our general fund allocation and actual inflation. So if you were to add inflation in, it's probably been going consistently down even that last year. Okay, grants and philanthropy. You can see the trend from 08-09 through last year. And you can see in general there has been a somewhat increasing trend. That bleep up in 09-10 was because we got $1.1 million in non-recurring revenues when the Expressway Authority took over Checker Park, and they gave us money to build out ZL Riley Park. So that's why it bumped up that particular year. And you see our trends in user fees, and they've been going upward. And in this presentation, you're going to see why. We believe about 17% of that is because of the increases that were approved in our user fees a couple of years ago, but it's largely because of increased utilization of all of our facilities. So our rentals have really skyrocketed, and I'm going to talk more about that further in this presentation. And that's mostly the reason why revenues have gone up. Okay, so these two pie charts show the change between 08-09 and 12-13 in terms of how we fund our operations. And what you see is back in 08-09, about 88% of our total budget came from the general fund. And by last year, that had gone down to only 81%. So a larger portion of our operations now are covered by user fees and grants. Okay, so now we're moving to highlights and key accomplishments. Since 2003, we've completed 12 park and playground renovations. We completed the city's tree inventory, a tree management plan. We got caught up on all of our priority prunings and takedowns, so we've really gotten caught up. We used to be months behind in terms of getting this work done, and we have caught up. This is a photo of the dedication of ZL Riley Park in 2010. We created a monuments and memorials policy a couple of years back. To date, we've installed 4 monuments. This photo is the first monument that we installed under this new policy, the Vietnamese American Memorial. There have been a lot of improvements and changes at Lake Eola Park. We expanded the park. We added 1.68 acres last year. Did a complete renovation of the fountain, created a coordinated sound and light show, including a sound system around the entire sidewalk around the park. We installed Sea Art Orlando, enhanced the Swan Boat program, and that has resulted in increased revenues. Last year we brought in $140,000 in revenues just renting swan boats, which is an amazing thing. And we created a swan program. It's like a little zoo there now. We have our swans microchipped. We have a veterinarian on staff. I can go on and on about all the great things we're doing with the swan program. And we are now maxed out in capacity for large events at Lake Eola Park. We cannot handle any more large events. We have so many that we have begun to now get promoters to move their events to other parks. And what's happened is we're now maxing out in terms of large events at other parks as well. So for instance, a few years ago we had only 2 events a year at Festival Park, and now we're full at Festival Park. We have over 20 events, large events a year there, and we can't accommodate any more. Okay, so tight management and increased demand have resulted in dramatic revenue increases since 2009. Our revenues are up at Bill Frederick Park by 300%. At Lake Eola Park, revenues are up by 400%. All of our other parks, they're up by 300%. Orlando Tennis Center revenues are up 120%, and we have had a huge increase in renting our ball fields around the city. Revenues are up 21% there. So this is really the big story behind the increase in revenues.
Mayor.
Commissioner Stewart?
Briefly tell me, how do you define a large event? Is it by attendee or is it by the space that they rent? Tell me how you...
It's generally by attendee.
Okay.
We don't have sort of a cutoff. It's not like if it's over this, it's big. So it's really those that have just thousands and thousands of attendees.
Okay. And so, I mean, an idea is, do you define it by what y'all have to do to support it? A good idea is a walk around Lake Eola is a whole lot different than the Track Shack event.
Yes.
So the question.
Yes, you know, with a lot of booths and just a lot more feet on the park.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And as the increase goes up of the fees, any idea about the increase in additional maintenance because of it?
Maintenance demands have gone up dramatically because of the heavy utilization of the park.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And do we have
having to resod, having to put staff out there, clean up, just having to fix problems with irrigation because too many feet on the ground. Yes.
Have you got some figures that you're going to share with us about that?
Yes, I believe towards the end, because that really, you know, where we're going to go on this presentation. Toward the end, we're going to talk about maintenance issues that we've had because of the heavy utilization. Okay. And I know, for instance, there's a lot of demand. I know commissioners are very often involved in large events, and there's a lot of demand to get the events done, but we're dealing with grass, and we can't have too many feet on it. And when we have too many events back-to-back at parks, the grass will turn to dirt. So we have to space them out. We have to manage it that way. And frankly, we're running out of space for large events.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we have completely re-engineered the city's children's programs. Our main focus of those programs is to impact school performance and prevent juvenile crime now. We have made investments in that direction over the past several years. Now we have teachers, and this is paid for by Orange County Public Schools, who tutor 1,300 children every single day at city recreation summer camps. We serve dinner now after school every single day to 1,500 children. We didn't used to do that before. We completely renovated computer labs at the Smith Center, the Jackson Center, Rosemont, and Colonial Town. All of that was funded by grants from the Orlando Magic. In Paramore, we've had high school reading and math scores up 100% and 81% respectively over the past 5 years as a result of Paramore Kid Zone. Juvenile arrests are down 87.5% in Paramore since we started Paramore Kid Zone in 2006. Teen births are down in the neighborhood by 32%. That photo is a young man who, that's Shantae Barton Stubbs, Executive Director of New Image Youth Center, and we have lots and lots of kids going to college from the neighborhood now.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes, sir.
Before we go any further, thank you, Mayor. Before we go any further, when you were talking about teachers tutor 1,300 children daily and recreational summer camps and all those different things we're doing, do we have some figures also? We'd like for the people to know, you know, how we're spending the money and where the money's coming from. Is it coming from the general fund? Is it coming from grants? Because I know at the end we're going to need this information for people to realize where we're at.
So
Impact
the children
in terms
at
of how
the
much
community
is spent.
centers themselves are enrolling in the city's summer camp program. Mm-hmm. And if those children qualify for food stamps, we are providing that program for free. So their actual coming there every day is funded by the city. The food that they're eating every day through this summer feeding program is funded by a federal grant, 100% of it. And the tutoring that the kids are getting from teachers is funded by Orange County Public Schools through Title I dollars. And then, as I said, some of the improvements at the sites have been accomplished through grants, like the build-out of the computer labs, or we have a couple of sites where we've had Kaboom playgrounds built through grants from Kaboom.
I know you guys have been extremely, extremely efficient because I've been working with you guys all along. When we talk about some of this, some of the investment of the city, how much ballpark are we talking about?
In our community centers?
Yes, I mean, with the programs.
Well, I'm going to get to there. You want me to
Oh, okay.
move forward?
I'm getting
gonna
ahead
break
of
it
you.
down.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
thank you.
No, thank you for that, Commissioner. Appreciate it. Okay, here's another example. Through a grant from the Corporation for National and Community Service, we now deploy 32 AmeriCorps members to work at 10 sites. The main focus of this is to get the older youth off the streets and out of our parks outside of the community centers and back into the community centers with all kinds of positive activities for them to engage in. These AmeriCorps workers not only work at our sites when school is out, but when school is in, they're in the schools. So they're working with the kids while the kids are in school and then after school back in the neighborhoods. This is funded again by a grant. And then we have the After School All-Stars program, and that is at every single middle school in the city of Orlando. And they have had 0 arrests among all of the couple of thousand youth that they serve every year. And juvenile arrests are down 39% in the schools in which they're operating. They received the highest score of 179 21st Century Community Learning Center programs this year. Number 1. They have been designated a model program for the 4th consecutive year in the state of Florida and one of the top 5 service organizations in the state of Florida. So now I'm going to get into the programs and services, and I'm going to get into some of the detail you were asking about, Commissioner. So we broke it down by these categories. Maintenance of city parks, that is a big chunk of what we do as a department. Maintenance of outdoor athletic facilities, and by that I mean all the ball fields, all the outdoor basketball courts, the outdoor tennis courts, all of those things. We consider that one whole area that we handle in the city. Our community centers, the amenities and activities that go on at our community centers. Our children's programs, I talked a little bit about that and how we've broken that out separately. Our senior programs, I'll talk some more about that. Tree management, managing the city's urban forest. The city of Orlando owns just over 100,000 trees. Our aquatics programs, we operate 11 pools. And then special facilities that we operate, and that includes Lake Eola Park, Bill Frederick Park at Turkey Lake, the Orlando Tennis Center, Orlando Pottery Studio, Green Up Orlando, and the Orlando Skate Park, and I'm going to talk more about each of these. So, first, maintenance of city parks. So this is everything related to maintaining 117 parks and other park locations that we are responsible for maintaining. Level of service, we're out there, we work 7 days a week doing this work. And so we have a certain level of service as far as how often do we mow, how often do we get out to parks to pick up trash, how often does irrigation happen at each park, how often do we go out there and do weed and pest controls. And we now vary the level of service based on utilization of the park. The parks that are used more regularly, we're out there more frequently because we have to do more maintenance more frequently at those parks. The ones that are not as highly visible or not as highly utilized, we have had to cut back on how often we're out there because of cuts in our funding. Total cost of doing all of that work is about $6.9 million a year. That's Dartmouth Park. Commissioner Stewart? Did you recognize it?
I do.
Okay, so now, maintaining all of our outdoor athletic facilities. And this means all of the city ball fields, the outdoor courts, mowing, sodding them, putting clay on the baseball fields, making sure the scoreboards work, making sure the nets aren't torn. The restrooms, making sure that they're maintained, that they're cleaned. The concession buildings, same thing. All of the irrigation, the lighting, resurfacing the courts when they're cracked, the fences when they're broken, making sure they're repaired. Field prep for 53 ball fields, 46 outdoor basketball courts, 19 tennis courts, and 10 volleyball courts. All of the work that has to be done to maintain this. So just level of service so you're aware, last year our fields and pavilions were rented 6,145 times to accommodate 453 attendees. And that represents an increase over the past 3 years in the number of rentals, a 48% increase in the number of rentals. And revenues have increased 21%, excuse me. So there's heavy demand. And I would have to say, when I get people asking to meet with me from the community to advocate for more resources, probably the most common one is different athletic groups, whether it's youth athletic groups, adult athletic groups that have demand for more ball fields, typically.
Mr. Stewart?
The core of where you and I have gone before is that the estimated cost is $3 million.
Yes, sir.
But now in this case, what's the estimated revenue for these specific fields?
I have that.
I mean, you've got increase in revenue, but you didn't give us a net. In other words, what's that net amount that we're paying out of general revenue for those fields? That's what I'm trying to get to.
Okay. I do have that here.
I know you
have
do.
my fiscal manager back here, and I knew she.
And you can get it later if you. I mean.
Okay, we'll come back.
Yeah.
We'll circle back around with that
Yeah,
answer.
that's okay.
We don't even nearly cover
That's
the
my
cost of
point.
doing this.
Yeah.
But the total cost of doing all this work is about $3 million a year. Kids playing soccer at Trotters. So our children's programs, and so we've put together our recreation division, after-school summer camp, and youth sports programs together with Paramore Kids Zone and After-School All-Stars. And we're serving about 10,400 children a year through these 3 operations. You can see how they're broken down. And we're estimating the total cost at $6.6 million. And you can see the asterisks here. So we've included the cost of all of our after-school and summer camp programs in that $6.6 million figure, instead of including it in the cost of operating our community centers. But if you want to think about what it costs without those programs, then it brings it down to only $2.483 million. So you can look at it both ways. You can look at what the children's programs cost without the after-school and summer camp programs and with them. And then later when I show you the community center slide, you can see what the community centers cost with and without the after-school and summer camp programs in them.
Commissioner Hill?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Is there a certain amount that is provided by grants?
Yes, a large portion of the funding for our children's programs comes in through grants. So if you recall the earlier slide that showed the grants, I can't say most of it, and I can give you a breakdown, but large portions of those grants are for our children's programs. Yes. And let me go back to that slide. Hang on. This is strictly, that's $6.6 million, and correct me if I'm wrong, Renee, that's strictly the general fund contribution. It doesn't include the grants. Is that correct? Okay, so senior programs. We operate 2 senior centers, El Claudia Allen and the Beardall Senior Center. But on top of that, we have senior programs that operate at the Rosemont, Englewood, Callahan, Jackson, and College Park Community Centers. And there's a senior program at the Pottery Studio. This slide gives you an example of some of the programs that operate at those sites. And so when I'm giving you fiscal data here, it's not just the 2 senior programs, but also the senior programs that are operating at these other sites. Attendance was an all-time high of 82,000 attendances last year. That's a 73% increase over 08-09, and the total cost of all of that is about $1.1 million. Ballroom dancing at Beardall. Okay, so now our community centers, and so now we've separated out the children's programs and the senior programs from the bottom line dollar figure here. So this is everything else that happens at community centers. When people come and rent them, when there are programs at night like Zumba, or when people use them as meeting spaces, or come into the computer labs at the sites, or come into the fitness rooms, or use the gymnasiums, or whatever it is. Everything else here. And our attendance is reached an all-time high of 562,000 last year. Public and private groups rented the facilities 2,888 days last year, bringing in 220,000 attendees to meetings and events. And an average of 5,500 people visit our 9 fitness centers in our community centers. Total cost of operating that service for the community is about $2.8 million a year. Again, I have pulled out what it costs to operate the senior programs and the summer camp and after-school programs. But when you add the summer camp and after-school programs back into it, now the cost of operating the community centers goes up to about $6.9 million. Okay? Tree management, and this is managing that urban forest of over 100,000 trees. That's trimming them, that's responding to requests, that's planting, that's everything, is about $1.8 million a year. And you can see last year how many trees were trimmed, removed, or planted. Aquatics, we operate 11 pools, 4 of them are year-round, and we have all kinds of programs, including adult fitness, learn to swim, etc. Total attendances last year, 67,000, and the estimated cost of operating 11 pools is about $1.4 million. My favorite picture. We taught more than 600 children how to swim last summer.
Mr. Stewart.
Numbers of use, and I think I understand it because I do that for a living, but when you look at, you're looking at total attendance that occurs at an individual event and just multiplying or adding that to all the total attendance during the course of a year. So you have the visits.
Visits. It's visits,
That
yes.
means, do you have any idea of what it means to unduplicated clients? In other words, in a seniors program, how many are actually involved? I know we've done that with the kids program. It's a little easier with the kids programs. But when you look at the other programs, how many citizens from Orlando are involved as an unduplicated client, and how many are not from the city?
We can do that, but not in every instance, because sometimes you're just doing a head count of people in the room. They're not actually signing in and coming through our data system when they come in. So this gives you the level of activity going on more than it gives you the actual number of people who are impacted.
Well, my thought is you had 200.
And I can get that number in some instances, but not every instance, Commissioner.
My thought only is as you begin to look forward, you have 246,000 people in our city, as the figure that you guys have used. How many of those people are somewhere in one of our recreation centers? Is it 22%? Is it 15%? That's a figure I think that we kind of want to begin to move forward on. See where we're touching our people, and it really is unduplicated clients to the number of people that are inside. And the same figure goes back to the kids rec. I mean, when you begin to look at the people that we serve, what percentage of the people that come to our ball fields really are citizens of Orlando versus outside of that? And I think we have kind of a better feel for that now than we used to 4 or 5 years ago, and in some cases can do it much more specific. But again, as I look forward, I'm looking at what's the impact of the citizens of Orlando, and what's that unduplicated impact?
Yes, sir. We can do that. It would be an estimate.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that can be done. Okay, so Lake Eola Park. Everybody knows what Lake Eola Park is, and we get over 2 million visitors a year there and 400 events annually. That's the big events and the small events, and there's no way I can tell you who those people are because it's kind of a head count thing. People aren't signing in. And the total cost of operating Lake Eola Park is $1.2 million a year.
Mr. Sheehan.
Is that, do you have anywhere where you compare the amount of income that each of the parks? Because I know that.
So the income to Lake Eola is about $500,000 a year.
So there is offset to income?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Pardon me, Mayor.
Or Stewart.
Let me ask, and maybe you'll see this later on philosophically, and it's really kind of a nuts and bolts question. If you end up having a rental of a facility for $1,000, just as an example, in addition to that requires additional maintenance, that's another $1,000. But the client pays both of those. That $2,000, there's a rental cost that's kind of incurred someplace else, but the additional $1,000 maintenance actually is incurred inside your figures here. I guess the question I'm asking
Yes.
is, when you look at $500,000 of revenue, that's not $500,000 of rental revenue, that's $500,000 of total revenue paid. So if there's extra things that we had to do to satisfy what the renter needed, it's also included in the $1.2 million. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, and it's included in the revenue side as well.
Right, that's what I mean.
It's
So
included on both sides.
it's
So
it's
you
kind
rent
of
Lake
a
Eola
wash.
Park, and let's say you rent the amphitheater, and they need our sound technicians to handle the audiovisual at the amphitheater. So we will pay the sound technicians, and it will show up in this $1.2 million, and they will pay us
And the
the
revenue
cost,
effect.
and that will show up on
So
the
it's a
revenue
wash.
side.
So now, if
Yes.
that's the case, then the question is, what's the real rental cost of like Lake Eola and all of, I mean, the idea is what's not related to direct rental of an individual place, but what's the rental cost? Is it about $200,000 that we actually charge for rent, and then the rest really is the additional things that occur? I'm
The
not picking on.
revenues are all rentals. I'm trying to think of what would be revenue that's not a rental at Lake Eola Park. It's
I mean,
either
you
the
mentioned
Swan boats,
technician.
which is, or renting it for events, and then the assorted things that, like renting the sound tech.
And I'm not, look, I am not picking on Lake Eola. I'm just using it as an example, because we can do the same thing at Dartmouth. You know, we charge $700 to rent for Dartmouth,
Yes.
but then they pay us $5,000 or pay us $4,500. Well, that difference is what additional expenses that we incurred that they reimbursed us for.
Yes.
So the net rental is only $700 for the use of the park, which really covers kind of the general maintenance of the park.
Yes.
And the rest covers the specific maintenance.
That's
what I'm kind of
correct.
looking at where.
And so, you know, when we set that fee for rental of Dartmouth Park, for instance, let's say it's $100 an hour, we're not setting it based on what it costs us to maintain that park.
Right,
We're
that's-
setting it
yeah.
based on what the market charges in other local municipalities for similar types of rentals. And, you know, as you can see, the amount we're bringing in revenues, which was 2-point-something million, is nowhere near what it costs to run the department. So we're not really basing our fees on trying to balance our budget.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to understand it. I'm not trying to separate, trying to be critical. I'm just trying to understand it. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sheehan.
Well, and there's a couple things, too, that happen in Lake Eola Park that other commissioners might not be aware of. You know, if we do have a destruction of a property, which has happened in the past, we do,
Yes.
we do, like we had a major event that really busted up the sod, and we completely had that event redo the sod. So we do have situations. It's not like Lake Eola is this drain. We do have situations, especially with the amount of events that we're having there. We do recoup, damage that happens a lot of times. And also, we have numerous not-for-profits that we are given reductions in fees to, but I think that's appropriate as part of what we give back to the community. So, to say we're doing both. We're paying our way, and we're also giving back to the community, too. So I think that to pick on Lake Eola, yes, we're the signature park, but we also give a lot back to the community with special events and things. So I think that's a misrepresentation, but we're doing a lot at Lake Eola Park to benefit people.
And to add to that, Commissioner, when you see $1.2 million in costs and $500,000 in revenues, that's probably the operation in my department that is the most closing the gap between costs and revenues of any other operation.
Is Lake Eola Park.
Is Lake Eola
That's
Park.
exactly, because we've worked.
It's the biggest moneymaker we have.
We have worked hard
Yes.
to do that. For everything from getting the new Swan boats, which is
Yes.
something I supported, and working with Thomas Chapman to get those funded. So again, those are things that didn't just kind of fall out of the sky.
Yes.
Those are things that we're doing to make sure that we are providing a good guest experience, which people then will pay for, which is a good thing, which helps offset our budget.
Yeah. I apologize, because Commissioner Sheehan, I am not picking on Lake Eola at all. The only thing I'm trying to identify is this is one of those areas that we do have kind of a clear understanding. It's also an area where I think the community has a clear understanding of the use of this park. And I'm just trying to come up using this as an example We could do, like I said, do the same thing for Dartmouth, the same thing for Trotters. We could do those same kind of things, but I think we don't charge enough in many cases for rental, and that rental really covers that general maintenance cost. And Lake Eola, because it's an iconic portion, I would treat Lake Eola entirely different than everything else. But the tracking of the expenses is what I'm really kind of looking at more than anything else. So I'm not trying to say that anything we spend is not worth it. I'm just trying to understand the tracking of the expenses.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Bill Frederick Park. So we have all kinds of amazing things going on at Bill Frederick Park, and last year we had over 4,500 cars pass through the gates there, and 105,000 people attending events there.
How
And
many
again,
cars?
this is more heavy utilization of the park constantly, and we've had a 400% increase in revenues at the
How
park.
many cars?
45,746 cars, Commissioner.
Yeah, John was jumping when you said 4,500.
Did I say 4,500?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. 45,000. Estimated cost of operating that park is $1.296 million a year. Tennis center, 11 courts there, all kinds of great things going on right now. And last year attendance was over 10,000 people. Revenues have climbed 120% since 08-09, and the cost of operating it is just shy of $300,000 a year. Pottery Studio, total attendance 16,899 last year, up 61% since 08-09. Estimated cost of operation $174,000. Orlando Skate Park, you can see the number of daily visits, 5,391. And the estimated cost of operation, $174,000 a year. Green Up Orlando, we log between 8,000 and 10,000 volunteer hours a year. The number of projects has increased from 52 in 03 to 72 last year, and we're going to be 80 this year. And total cost of operations, $352,000 a year. Okay, so now I'm going to go through some of the cuts that we've made over the past several years. In 10-11, we cut 56 positions, saving about $2 million. We had to reorg our entire department. Because of the eliminated positions, we reallocated them to remaining staff. We eliminated some functions, and we outsourced several operations. We eliminated the city nursery, the puppetry program, the nature program at Langford Park, the after-school program at Lock Haven Community Center. We reduced pool hours at the time. We reduced community center hours at the time. We reduced watering cycles in many parks. And we cut back on the frequency of park maintenance in many parks, especially the less visible parks. Recreation created a model for managing staff at their sites, and that ended up cutting $725,000 off of our costs. We instituted fee increases back in 08-09. That contributed to that revenue increase, contributed about 17% of it. And then we have had, both in the Parks Division and the Recreation Division, very, very methodical and tenacious work to reduce our utility expenses. You can see examples of the stuff that we've done. We've cut utility expenses about $200,000 a year in parks, and year-to-date in recreation about $150,000 a year. So I've prioritized our programs. We can go back to this slide if you want to, but this is what I think is what's in greatest demand. And when it comes to what's most vulnerable, I will have to say that it's our unmet maintenance needs. We have so many facilities, and I'm talking about both our community centers, our park facilities, whether it's the sidewalks in the parks, the fences, the benches, and then our ball fields. I mean, just, all of those feet on these parks, the cleats on the ball fields, the courts, the basketball courts that get cracks in them, the pavilions, all of these facilities all over the city. And Rebecca showed you how there has been less money allocated to CIP. And traditionally, that's how we used to pay for renovations of playgrounds. We have playgrounds that are 15, 16, 20 years old that have not been renovated. If we don't have funds for renovation, then as the pieces go into disrepair, we remove them so the playgrounds become less functional. The ball fields, I mean, we have so many feet on them. We have people wanting us to resod. After the season is over, we have to replace the clay, we have to replace the sod, the nets are torn, we have to replace them. All of that used to come from CIP. So not being allocated those funds means that these maintenance, there's no funding available to maintain all of these facilities. Maintenance of outdoor athletic facilities, including replacing torn netting, broken fences, resodding muddy ball fields, putting clay on pitcher's mound, drawing lines on soccer fields, repairing tennis court cracks. Aging playgrounds and community center amenities, the treadmills, chairs, carpeting in the community centers, rusted fixtures. As old equipment breaks, it's removed and not replaced. Playgrounds and community centers decline in size and functionality, and our reputation and utilization declines as a result. So that is, I think, the biggest area of risk for us when it comes to not having sufficient funding. Okay, so to recap, we've had significant downsizing in FPR, resulting in a 29% leaner workforce and a 47% decline in the number of employees per city resident. We've undergone numerous cost-cutting initiatives, resulting in reductions in utility costs, personnel expenses, liabilities caused by tree damage, and more. We perform critical roles in this community by improving educational performance, reducing juvenile crime, improving health and wellness, and building community cohesion, and having parks, having public spaces, community spaces, just the quality of life. Utilization of FPR facilities and programs has increased dramatically over the past many years, and we have increasingly been relying on grants and user fees to meet the need in Orlando. And that's it. Any questions?
Thank you, Lisa. Further questions? Commissioner Gray.
Thank you, Lisa, very much. And I want to, thanks for putting this together. Clearly, you've got a ton of different departments. The part I'm struggling with, and I'm kind of looking at you with one eye and Rebecca at the other, is what would help me, what we're here to do, I think, is to help with some suggestions and make some choices and decisions on where we want to deploy dollars. And if we go back, let's just pick the Orlando Tennis Center, for instance. Question, at the bottom, you have estimated cost of $299,000. Is that, to clarify, is that a net number?
No, gross.
Okay.
It's
So
not net.
what I'm trying to do, what would help me, and this is just one specific example, is at the end of the day, what's the value proposition for the tennis center? What's the net number? We have revenues, which include membership fees. Maybe you get some grants, whatever those are. That's for you and Rebecca's team to figure out what's a fair representation of revenue and what's a fair representation of cost. So if we know what a net number is, we can say, let's just assume this is a net number, so that we say, is it worth $300,000 a year to have our tennis center? And if it is, that's where we can start to fine-tune both sides of that equation, revenues and cost. This, you don't really know what the tennis center is netting. And I think that's somewhat we're struggling with. Not that it's good or bad, it's just a choice of resources. And as you get to your prioritization, that helps us prioritize. Because you may have some services that are net revenue producers. We may want to increase those. Maybe not. But those are things I think I'm struggling with. I don't know what's making money, what isn't, and should we redeploy dollars or should we throw more at it? I just don't know.
Yeah, we can get you that information. That won't be a problem. But going back to the slide on revenues, oops, sorry. So you see $26 million in the cost of our operations on the far right bar there, right? Mm-hmm. And then when you go to revenues, you see $2.3 million. So there are no profit centers, except perhaps the swan boats. There are no profit centers, and I don't know of any parks and recreation department anywhere in the country that is a, it's not revenue producing. This is considered a quality of life amenity.
Yeah.
So So, but yes, we can drill down, because I get it that you want to see also by program where are we getting the most bang for the buck, and so we can absolutely do that for you, no problem.
And I'm not sure it's you exclusively. My sense is we're going to find that as we go throughout the day.
Yes, sir.
It's because it's all about choices. It doesn't mean it's right or it's wrong. We have limited number of resources, and we need to use them accordingly, and that would help figure out what's self-sustaining, and if it's not so self-sustaining, what do we have to do to boost that program or service?
Okay.
Thanks.
We'll do that.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. And if I may help with that, I have noticed in working with you guys that you'll never make a profit on this, because this is more a service department than anything else. But we need to look at the profit from a different standpoint. What are we accomplishing with the community, with our kids, with our seniors? And in that particular aspect, we're getting a big revenue, because it is producing a lot. It's helping us. It's minimizing crime. Is helping us maintain our community and our society at a level where we can produce in other aspects. So it is. I believe I understand that, and as Commissioner Gray is probably trying to convey, is how we use our dollars, how we optimize the use of our dollars. In this particular case, I already understand that there's no revenue whatsoever in terms of dollars. But in terms of what the product of our investment is much, much bigger. What you guys are doing with as little personnel as you have is amazing. The amount of money you have saved through the years, through later years, and increasing with the increase of population we have. And I have noticed firsthand how you guys work with these kids, with the seniors, for everybody. You guys are doing a wonderful job. But I really appreciate your presentation, because it has given us a different perspective, which is the one on how is the money allocated in terms of people being serviced. So thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
And Commissioner Gray, I appreciate your point, but also understand the pieces of our government that are self-sustaining are our enterprise funds that are fee-based. What we're focused on is the things that we fund with our general fund, which are our taxpayer dollars that go into police or fire. And there are some fees associated with different departments. Fire department, for instance, has the transport fees associated with it to offset some cost, but we're subsidizing all of these departments out of taxpayer dollars in one sense or another, and most of them aren't self-sustaining unless they're an enterprise fund. Commissioner Sheehan.
Well, and I just want to make a point that not everything can be a Lake Eola, even though through Lake Eola we do a lot of give back to the community. And, you know, while I've got one of the top ones, but I also got one of the lowest ones with the skate park. But I have to tell you, since we built that skate park, parents are so happy to have somewhere to drop. If you have a 13 to 14-year-old boy, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, you know, they are relieved to have somewhere for them to go. And it's also, I think, helped to reduce crime a lot because these kids have somewhere to go. These rowdy teenage boys, you know, I mean, so there is a intrinsic value, even though it might not be the biggest return on investment. We still are getting a bunch of rowdy teenage boys off the street, which is a good thing. It's for them to do after school and or during the summertime and things like that. And a lot of moms, believe me, have pulled me aside and said, thank you. I know you got some flack for building that skate park, but thank you, because now I have somewhere to drop my son off where he can do something constructive and be around with the kids and be supervised. They like that. So, again, there's a value to that as well.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Lisa. And just to finish that thought, Commissioner Gray, but you're absolutely right. What the decision we're going to make is how do we allocate our finite number of general fund dollars, and do we want to cut a program out of Family Parks and Rec, or do we want to cut the number of firefighters we have, close a fire station, or do we want to increase the amount of general fund money that we have? Thank you, Lisa. Oh,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Hill.
Yes, when you're talking about funding, is there any dollars allocated for Callahan Park? There's no park benches nor tables. And what I do know of growing up there and the experience there, most people don't have transportation. And there's a lot of times where they bring their children for birthday parties or have family reunions there in that park. And I understand they were removed because of loitering and those type of situations there. And associated with the coalition, but is there any plans or dollars set aside to where we're going to put benches back, even if they're the divided benches, so people don't sleep on the benches, and tables back there, so that the community can utilize that park?
Well, that would go in the category of the last few slides that I put up. We don't have, that would typically come out of a CIP project, and we've not been allocated funds for that. So, and as you can see with the increases in grant funds every year, over the past few years, when there are special projects that we want to do, we try to apply for grants to cover that sort of thing, because we have not been getting the funds from general revenues to do that kind of work because of cutbacks and the budgetary constraints that you're going to hear about all day today. We've just simply not been getting funds. So even replacing roofs on some of our leaking facilities, or gym floors, old gym floors, we've gotten CDBG grants for that. We've had to go out and seek grant funding because there's just not enough money in the city budget to cover those kinds of amenities that we need all across the city.
Okay.
That might make a good CDBG project.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Mayor, if I may, and this has nothing to do with you, but, and I don't know, I'm just, I guess, asking ahead of seeing what's to come. What we would like to see, and going along the lines of Commissioner Gray's pinpointing the fact that we want to get to see what's the net revenue, if we have any. We would like to see at the end of every presentation what has been the expense through the year and what has been the revenue, to see where we at. And I'm saying this before you guys come up and start presenting. I don't know if you guys have that data. I haven't looked at the whole book. I don't know if that's part of y'all's presentation, but it'll make it a lot easier for us also to determine what's, where we need to concentrate in either making revenue or cutting services.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I had a question, Mayor.
Commissioner.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I didn't know you still had.
Commissioner, I think you said this year, when we have a partial year, sometimes that is not very representative of kind of the budget process. I'd suggest that we provide you with this year's budget.
Let me rephrase. I'm sorry. When I said I'm going to mean this year, because as you said, this year we haven't finished the year, but as the last, I guess, as you have been presenting since 2001 or whatnot.
We can provide you with what was funded this year.
Okay.
And we'll see what we can produce over the lunch break to provide you with some view of in a particular area. And we may not be able to get too detailed quickly, or we can go more detailed if you have questions, but just to show the revenues that are produced from various sources.
Or last year's, maybe last year's, as an indicator of where we're heading.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sheehan?
Oh, sorry, I thought that Lisa was sitting down. I didn't mean to interrupt. To go to Commissioner Hill's question, too, we do have district budgets for specific needs, and I work very closely with FPR with monthly meetings, and a lot of times we can get things like playground equipment with grants, or we've been able to volunteer some. I've got a company that comes in and paints community centers and does stuff like that, and does some remodeling for me. You can work with FPR to get some of that stuff done and leverage your most dollars, because there's not a lot of money in the budget for that, but sometimes you can take some of your commissioners' funds and get some community volunteers and make some of that happen. But working with Family Parks Recreation, there's some ways that we can get those dollars allocated to the needs. And I know I'm frustrated too. I've had, my community centers have not been renovated in many, many years, so we were able to work together to get some things done that would not have been able to be done otherwise, working with the Magic, because people didn't understand that a lot of the Callahan kids and Paramore kids are coming over to my after-school center in Colonial Town. There just wasn't that. It's kind of an education process too, to get those grant dollars and opportunities that you need to fight for your community, for your kids.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Commissioner Ortiz, the total user fee revenue Lisa did present, do you want that broken down?
No, you did a wonderful job. I don't need yours. I already figured that one out. I appreciate what you did
But
there.
we can definitely get per program what the revenues were. So those programs that I presented, what our expenses were, I can definitely
Yeah, I added.
calculate what the revenues were, so you can see the
Okay.
net on
Okay.
all of them. That wouldn't be a problem. Hopefully today? I think
Thank
we can do
you.
it today.
Thank you, Lisa. Wonderful job, then.
Thank you.
And the next department is Public Works, and that will have a bunch of the enterprise funds, so we can distinguish some of the guys that are actually self-sustaining.
Yeah. Mayor's buying lunch. Just checking. Who was that?
So I don't let you guys out of the building.
Thanks, Mayor and Commissioner, and I appreciate the lead-in regarding the enterprise funds. We are primarily enterprise funds in Public Works. And let me just start off with saying that Rick Howard would have wished to have been here. He's out west for the Association of State Floodplain Managers National Conference, which is something that is near and dear to our hearts. And let's see. This is our org chart. I will be discussing the activities of 7 divisions within the Public Works Department. And I don't have any of the wow factors that FPR and economic development have. The services that we provide to the City of Orlando, actually what I was planning on doing was a day in the life of a citizen from the time he or she gets up in the morning until the time he or she goes to bed at night. But really, most of our operations are 24 hours a day, not on call. We've got people whose regular shift is the night shift. If you get up at 3 in the morning, have to go to the bathroom, have a hankering for ice cream, and want to drive to the store, you expect when you get to an intersection that traffic light's going to work. So our services are very much behind the scenes, and our citizens should be able to take those services for granted. You've got a couple of pie charts. They're not very descriptive in your handout, but we can certainly get into these further. And I'll use a 10-year window for our head count. 10 years ago, we had 679 employees. Today, we have 626. We've had a net reduction of 53 employees. And how that has occurred over the 10 years is we've had an increase of 40 employees in our enterprise funds and a reduction of 93 employees in the general fund. That's a reduction in general fund staff of about 44%. Here is our Public Works General Fund staffing, and at this point I just want to throw out some metrics for y'all to keep in mind. I didn't do slides of them, but over the past 10 years, with the exception of the Wee-Wahootie annexation late last year, we've had an increase in the area of the City of Orlando of about 1.2%. Over that same period of time, our street mileage has increased by 6%, our sidewalk mileage by 16%, and the population by about 20%. So you can imagine the city limits are filling in. And what goes with that are increased demands on our services. Transportation Engineering Division, I'm going to touch on a couple of the highlights here. The Transportation Engineering does everything from working, coordinating on Sunrail, which was just rolled out, all the way down to mobility and safety issues for our citizens and visitors who are disabled. Also, the budget for transportation engineering, more than half of it is consumed by street lighting. So we're very interested in improved efficiency so that we can reduce those O&M costs over time. And here's how our transportation engineering staff have been reduced over those 10 years. Now, I've got a few slides here that focus mainly on traffic signals, but one of the things that I wanted you to see as you thumb through these is over the past probably 4 or 5 years, we haven't had a great increase in the number of signals, but there's a lot more sophistication with the networking that has occurred. So even though we've got a declining staff, at the same time, we have a staff that must be more sophisticated and much better trained than they would have been in the past. And these are some of our other slides that show the increase in signals with emergency vehicle preemption. And closed circuit TV cameras and intersections with video detection. Engineering services is where I live as city engineer, and we deal with stormwater project management, survey and mapping, and floodplain management. I touched a little bit on floodplain management earlier, and this is extremely important to us in the community rating system. The City of Orlando is a Class 6 community, so that means that everybody in the city who has flood insurance is due a 20% discount on their flood insurance premiums. And this is especially important to us because within the city limits, fully a quarter of the city is in 100-year floodplains. And here's how our funding has changed over time between the general fund and the contributions we get from the enterprise funds. The Streets and Stormwater Division is kind of a hybrid. The street side of the house is general fund. The stormwater side of the house is enterprise fund, of course. We maintain over 700 miles of city streets, both asphalt and brick, and we maintain 870 miles of city sidewalks. We're in the process of wrapping up our stormwater inventory, and we now know we have over 65,000 stormwater structures and the pipe network to go with it. We monitor and maintain over 100 lakes, and we also manage the city's responses to EPA and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection regarding our MS4 permit under the NPDES system, which is the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. These are some of the stormwater issues we deal with. The pictures, or the series of pictures at the top, is the well over near Orlando Skate Park. It's not supposed to operate this way, but because it takes a lot of water from Lake Underhill, this is what happens. Necessity being the mother of invention, some of Lisa Henry's people came up with the idea of a hinged spring-loaded lid. And so when the well does burp, that's a technical term, it can release that pressure. And without that, if we were to try to strap this well cover down or cover it up with dirt, we risk literally blowing the well box apart. The pictures at the bottom, we never want to see cars throwing up wakes, but sometimes we have rainfall events that exceed our design standards, or in the cases of these three slides, we may have a system that was designed in the 60s, and the design standards back then were pretty conservative. But what's happened over time is residential areas have gone commercial, there's more pavement on the ground, and runoff is going to increase. Also, necessity being the mother of invention, sometimes we've found that workers over the years have extended these systems into areas that they were never intended to drain in the interest of trying to solve flooding problems. Here's how our streets budget has changed over time. You can see the reduction because it's general fund. And here's our total employees trend. And you see we're right at 55 employees now. That's about one employee on the street side of the house for every 2 square miles of city. And here's how our work order trend has changed over time. You can see it's trending upward. And a comparison of our street maintenance work order to budget trend. And I'm not going to dwell on this slide too much because I've got a couple more, one specifically for asphalt streets and one for brick streets. But the right-hand column in each case are our streets that are in satisfactory or good condition. And you'll see that as we've moved over time, over the 8 years since the last inventory was done, we've got a lot more streets that are considered to be failing. And this is the condition index specifically for our asphalt streets. I know that figure is rather cringeworthy, but we've determined that in order to get all of our streets back up to good or satisfactory standards, this is what we need to spend. The photos here are of Bumby Avenue, and this is a stormwater project that we're going to be getting implemented in the next year or two. And based on our experience with Parr Street, we anticipate this is probably going to be a $5 million project. And we're going to try to take care of every problem that we can with stormwater utility dollars if it makes sense and we can justify it. Obviously, we can't use stormwater funds for building sidewalks, But we can do things like even replace driveway aprons. If there's a stormwater benefit to do that, we can do that. Over the next 2 years, we anticipate we do have significant reserves on the stormwater side, but we have a lot of projects in the hopper, and we expect to be rolling out projects and getting that money spent. We have a similar figure for brick streets, and of our street inventory total, brick streets account for about 8% of that total inventory, and yet this is the amount of money that we need to spend in order to get those streets back up to standards. What we did a few years ago, we determined that we could use city staff and develop an in-house brick street crew, and the metric we came up with was we could do a full-depth, full-width restoration of a brick street about a half mile a year. So every century we should be able to get back to the streets and start over again. And things look even worse for the brick streets, as you can see.
Commissioner Stewart.
Yeah, Jim,
Yes, sir.
the numbers I'm a little bit confused on, so I'll make sure we're on the same page. You go back 2 slides to asphalt pavement roadways.
Yes, sir.
Got a couple of numbers back on the right-hand side, $184 million. And you've got 15.6, looks like million dollars, SY.
Oh, no, that's 15.6 million square yards.
Okay, million square yards,
Yeah.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
And to completely rehab all the asphalt, it's 184.
Yes, sir. And there's one thing I forgot to mention. As I did touch on, we have not done a pavement condition inventory since 2006. But through our experience, we found that, and it's a 100-point scale, we found that these streets will reduce each year over time by about 3 points. So that's how these figures are derived. And we recognize that's an extrapolation, but we just wanted to make sure that we had some figures that we felt were realistic. These streets, and as I mentioned regarding the brick streets, you can't just take the asphalt off and figure you've got a brand new street and it's ready to go and it doesn't require any maintenance.
Now, the next page, though, you've got a figure of 187. That's only for brick?
That's just for the brick, yes, sir.
Okay. But I haven't got a square yard figure for brick.
I could get that for you. We don't
Not a
have
big
that as
deal.
part of the
Just gotta tell you,
presentation.
So it's 184 and 187.
That's correct. Yes, sir. And one other thing regarding brick street repair, despite all we hear from vendors that have the greatest thing since sliced bread or shoelaces, there is nothing easy about brick street repair. The guy that manages that program started as a laborer on one of the brick crews, and he said you got to touch every brick. So it's extremely labor intensive. And on the stormwater side of the house, we do contribute to the general fund through OPEB, the dividend fee, and the administrative fee. Our parking division operates 10 garages, 4 public surface lots, and manages 1,500 on-street parking spaces. And also have a graphic for their revenue over time. And one thing that's probably more important for the parking division than for any of our other enterprise funds, they have to be very mindful of what their competitors are doing. We did have a rate increase in 2009. You see the uptick there in 2009. But notice how it falls off over time, and that's because parking very much tracks the way the economy is going, and now that the economy is starting to heat back up, you can see the uptick in revenue. Our solid waste division, we handle 189,000 stops per week. That's part of what I was saying about we touch every citizen in the city of Orlando every day. And we've got a number of initiatives going on because of our heavy emphasis in equipment and tipping fees. We do everything that we can to save money. And we had some graphics in the earlier presentations about employees to city resident. And back 10 years ago, we had 1 solid waste employee for every 450 residents. Now we're about 1 employee to every 625 residents. So not only are we operating more efficiently, through automation, we're saving employees' backs.
Good. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt, Mayor.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Thank you, sir. Could you repeat those Those figures again, 1 employee for everyone?
Sure. Yeah, I didn't have a slide for that, unfortunately, but 10 years ago it was 1 employee for every 450 citizens, and now we're 1 employee for every 625 citizens.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure. Our wastewater division, as you probably know, we manage 3 water reclamation facilities, Conserve 1, Conserve 2, and Iron Bridge. We have the Orlando Easterly Wetlands, and we have over 200 lift stations and 756 miles of pipe, and that doesn't include the laterals that must serve every customer. Wastewater also regulates industrial users and private wastewater collection systems. And I do apologize for having this slide up for lunch. We don't have any third world examples like the photo on the upper left, but we do have overflows. We do have backups. It happens. We try to minimize when those happen, and we try to deal with them aggressively. You or your residents may have seen door hangers like this. The number one problem that we have that causes these sewer overflows and backups is grease and proper disposal of grease. So a lot of what wastewater does is to educate the public about what they can put down the drain. If stuff does get out on the street, our wastewater division works very closely with our stormwater staff to get the problem corrected. And because of the topography in the city of Orlando, oftentimes it may end up in our lakes. So we have door hangers for this to inform citizens as to what's going on, and we also inform them when the lake will be clear. We have a lake alert system that we can get that information out to all the neighborhoods that are affected.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Mayor, what is that picture on the top left?
We think that's
corner?
India. If this ever happened to our staff, God forbid, they would be properly suited up.
What is that?
It's a guy inside a sanitary manhole.
What
That's
is
not
that
here.
white stuff?
Not one
Ryan?
of our guys, right?
I want to know.
Oh, okay.
It's another picture of somebody else, not one of our guys, right?
Not one of our guys. No,
Good.
sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
We would provide goggles.
Before I leave this slide, regarding sewer overflows, and Commissioner Stewart, you're painfully aware of the problems that we've had in College Park recently. Sometimes utility owners send contractors into the area that do stupid things like drilling through our lines. And this is the kind of stuff that a property owner may come home to. So we do have the power, though. When this kind of stuff happens, we can withhold permits, and that gets the utility owner's undivided attention. I'd mentioned the lift stations. We've added 19 new lift stations with no change in staff. And one thing I need to say here, that when we keep our staffing levels flat or declining, but our infrastructure is increasing over time, we're starting to migrate from doing preventive maintenance to corrective maintenance. So this is something that we may need to consider adding enterprise fund enterprise fund staff in order to
Pardon
do
me.
preventive maintenance. Yes, sir.
How would you define that?
Pardon?
Give me a definition between preventive maintenance and corrective maintenance.
Well,
Our example of
the
that.
corrective maintenance is just what I was discussing about College Park, where we encounter a problem and we have to go in and correct it.
Okay.
Preventive maintenance would be doing things like going into systems before a problem results and doing cleaning. I'll come back to the stormwater example, or stormwater inventory. Over the past 30 years, that program has been very much reactive. We have a cave-in in the street. We send out employees to take care of it. We've got some 30-year employees that have always worked that way. But what I want to do is put those systems on a maintenance schedule. So we're inspecting them and cleaning them. The same thing goes for the wastewater system. And here are some other slides comparing accounts and revenue. Our O&M costs have averaged at about the fiscal year 06 level, and our O&M costs have remained largely flat while the consumer price index has increased 22% over the past 10 years. And as with the other enterprise funds, contributions are made to the general fund. Our revenue is up, staffing is level. I'll finish off with the capital improvements in infrastructure development division. This model
Mayor.
actually...
Before
Ms.
you,
Rings?
thank you. Before you go to the next,
Sure.
back under your wastewater, the staffing and system growth trends chart, where you have the 19 lift stations.
Yes, sir.
and no change in staff. What's the correlation between the staff and the lift stations here? Because staff don't man those lift stations every day.
Well, it's just an indication that we have an increased maintenance load.
Okay.
You can't put capital in the ground without there being operation and maintenance costs, and we've maintained staffing fairly level, and but yet we've had an increase in infrastructure. Kind of goes along with the metrics that I mentioned, that we got 20% more population than we did 10 years ago, and it just, whatever margin or flexibility we have in doing maintenance, it just makes it tougher and tougher to be able to stay on top of these things.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
So I'd mentioned, I'll finish off with capital improvements. This is a model that's been around actually since the 80s, although this division has existed since about 2005. We had a brief interruption in the early aughts, but it's a model that works, and our guys can do this work cost effectively compared to hiring outside consultants. I have some additional graphs that show their staffing levels over time, and they also make contributions to the general fund. And I'll finish with how I started. You should be able to take our services for granted, and we don't expect to get accolades for what we do, because people expect these services to work, and hopefully all you're hearing is crickets. Thank you.
Commissioner Sheehan.
Well, and the whole thing about, I don't like the way that it's shown that brick streets is this huge problem that we can't fix. This is the first time in 14 years I've been given an accurate figure of what it would take to fix the streets appropriately, because it has been a huge problem. And all I've been told is, well, it's not a problem, it's not a problem, we're not getting complaints. Now I've been forwarding the complaints over, and now it's $184 million instead of let's ignore the problem. Now I've been giving the problems to Public Works, and now I'm being told, well, there's just no money. So again, this is what happens when you put off maintenance and don't take care of things, then it just becomes a huge number.
Well, it becomes a huge number, and you have to have budget in order to be able to attend to these
Exactly,
things.
and that's my point, is that we're going to have to take care of these streets, and rather than making it brick streets against regular streets, it's a big number no matter how you slice it. And we need to take care of these streets, because obviously it's a huge problem. And looking over the brick street inventory, I've seen that a lot of them have been categorized as failing when they just have a couple of dips here and there, which is why people like them. My concern is these big gaping holes that are being asphalt thrown in them and stuff like that. So, if there's a way to prioritize reasonably, and not have to look at the whole thing, but prioritize them reasonably. But we do need to put money into streets. I mean, obviously, $180 million to fix these potholes and things, and Bumby's in my district, and I get complaints on that constantly. So
as do we. And
exactly.
that's why
So it's
higher
not
on
a
our
matter
list.
of people aren't asking; it's a matter of a funding issue. So again, these are important things that we need to do to fix, and this is doing the streets. I mean, people want to protect their car on the street and drive safely. I mean, that should be a given. So
well, and I'm glad you brought up the Brick Street issue, Commissioner, because we do have a lot of projects proposed for the Southeast Lakes Basin, which is entirely in your district now, and many of those streets are brick.
Right.
And as with asphalt streets, what we're doing is we're hitting as many of these problems as we can at the same time we do these stormwater projects in order to restore these brick streets. I don't think when Lisa Henry took that photo, she realized it was in front of my house. I was, as a citizen, one of the first beneficiaries of a rebricking project. And I use that word emphatically, beneficiary, because we only pay a portion of the cost of removing the asphalt from those streets. And then we come to find out there are reasons why those streets were covered up with asphalt to begin with. And so it's something that needs to be discussed, and I think they're valuable. They add charm to the city, but because of the labor intensity of doing any repairs, they're going to be a significant portion of our budget.
well, and I think the problem is we're in such a hole now.
Yes.
With the overall
You're absolutely
budget,
right.
with the overall street budget. That's the problem, not whether it's bricks or valuable. The problem is the overall lack of maintenance and not paying attention to the problem over many, many years. Like I say, this is the first time I've, as a commissioner, all I've been told is it's not a problem, it's not a maintenance problem. You know, we don't have a problem. That's what I've been told for 10 years. Now, you know, for 14 years. Now that I've been providing, you know, inventories and complaints as people have been, and, you know, now that there's been more attention drawn to it, now all of a sudden I'm given a number, and yeah, y'all, that's astronomical. That's a lot of money. Where are we going to get that from, especially in a bad budget year? So again, it's not that it's not a problem. But this is what happens when you don't pay attention to a problem and don't do the maintenance that's necessary. I want to get your money, but boy, how are we going to do this? That's a big number.
I said the figures would be cringeworthy.
They are definitely cringeworthy. And it's not, but it's, again, when you sweep something under the rug and you don't maintain something, this is the kind of wake-up call that you get later on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. At the end of the day, after taking the revenues and the expenses, how much more money do we need to be able to accomplish our mission?
You mean specifically as it relates to
As of
street
right now,
maintenance?
as of the budget, how much more money will you consider do we need on this department to put things in perspective?
I really don't want to say $360 million. I think first order of business, we need to update our pavement condition index before we move forward. I wouldn't want to make any decisions based on an extrapolation, but I think
We need to have some
that-
idea here, so I'm basically asking for, I guess, an estimate, a good estimate.
Well, I have other division managers here. Lisa, would you want to speak to that?
I can get you right after lunch. What I would feel comfortable with is taking the 2000.
Lisa, you need to come up to the mic.
What I would feel comfortable with is taking the 2006 numbers and giving you that number. That number is accurate. It was done by a professional engineering corporation that came through and drove and did the condition index, and I can give you that number. That would be the most accurate number that we could give you today.
As of what extra monies do we need for this department in order to accomplish our mission overall in the city?
To do the specifically the brick and the
No, I'm talking per department, per your department. How much more money?
all of Public Works.
Exactly. How much are we in the hole? Let's put it that way. And how much, in other words, how much money we need in order to meet our needs?
That's a more general question.
Yes.
Commissioner, I think they'll use whatever money we will allocate to the Public Works Department. So it's more of a question of we have to determine how to allocate whatever money we end up with between Public Works, Fire, Police, Parks and Recs. But I can guarantee you, if given a number, it's going to be more than whatever we can allocate.
No, and I understand that part, but I need to know that because even though it's going to be more than what we can afford, I need to have an idea of what we're looking at.
Also, let me add, Commissioner, first order of business is taking care of what we have, being able to make from a revenue resource standpoint. So while we may not be making the dramatic reduction in some of that street, we are on an annual basis being able to do some of it. We are taking down, as Jim mentioned, we take down some of those streets. Part of this discussion today is about just being able to maintain our current level of service. So I want to start there. I don't want to lose sight of that. That's as much a part of the conversation today of what they're also showing of. This is what we're doing with our current levels, current resources. And if we don't have those resources available to us, then we'll have a further impact, degradation of level of service. So that's also part of the conversation, even before we get into humongous numbers about fixing a 100-year problem.
I totally understand. But the reason I'm asking this question the way I'm asking it is because the public is watching us and they're keeping tabs on what we're doing. We want to make sure that they understand the whole picture. We're trying to take care of business. We're trying to prioritize on what is needed immediately. But we're not taking care of everything. You see what I'm saying? We are trying to do the best we can with the monies we have. But if we had to increase our taxes and whatnot, people need to know why are we taking this step and what else is out there that we're not taking care of because we don't have enough money. That's the only reason I'm asking that question the way I'm asking it. Thank you.
Commissioner Sheehan?
And Lisa, I think it would be helpful
Lisa.
for that streets inventory. I think that would be good because a lot of times, I mean, it's an overall overwhelming number. So what are the worst ones? Again, I know my street's on a failing. I mean, my street's on a failing. I live on a brick street. It's on a failing list. It's not nearly as bad as what's in front of Jim Hunt's house. What I'm saying is, if let's prioritize it based on the limited resources and what's an actual. Maybe it's not as bad as 187 million. Maybe we can go pick up the worst ones. Again, that's the kind of information I'm interested in. And if we have a 2006 inventory, about what's bad, why are we just getting that information now? That's the frustrating part for me. In dealing with these complaints from citizens is trying to get this information. So I think, again, that street inventory that you suggested would be helpful because obviously this is a way big, this is something that we can't begin to, this huge number is not something we can deal with. But what can we do? What's reasonable? Well, how can we get to the worst ones? Like, I would think Bumby would probably be on the worst list because...
It's on the failing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm talking about, prioritizing what's worst in terms of getting that taken care of.
And in the database, it's listed failing the way Jim had it on the slide. There's failing, very serious, and the ones that we calculated are based on a grade A through F. F is a 60. 60 and below is is what we used. But I have the spreadsheet.
Maybe go to 10.
It's a 7.
Yeah.
10 is failing.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's too low, but we can, it's segmented. It's a 7,000-line spreadsheet. Okay. So I can manipulate it however it needs to be manipulated to come up with if you say X, like the mayor said, you have X number of dollars, I can tell you we'll get to number, 15. We'll get to all roads that are, score of 0 to 15 we can do. So that's the kind of thing that we can come up with. Because, I knew when I gave them the numbers that it's a huge number.
Right.
So.
And in terms of solving, in terms of dealing with customer service and so the kind of complaints that we get as commissioners, these are the kinds of things that we need to communicate instead of just saying, well, we don't have a problem. I can't. Nobody believes that.
I completely understand.
Especially if we have $180 million times 2, it is a problem.
Right.
Thank you. Right.
Commissioner Stewart.
And I guess the model that you've suggested is exactly right, but let me kind of make sure that I understand from my standpoint. And so that starts with this question. How much money do we have set aside today in the current revenue estimate for brick roads and for asphalt roads?
It's $2.4 million for asphalt roads, and I did want to take an opportunity to come back and answer one of Commissioner Sheehan's questions, which may be helpful. When we set up our brick crew, which is 5 staff, the guy that supervises that crew reminded me that was about half of what he needed. And also bear in mind that in Lisa's operation, she's also responsible for sidewalk safety. We take trip and falls very seriously, and in order to do a proper brick street repair, we've got to dismantle some of those concrete crews that handle sidewalk repairs. But we can't diminish the importance of dealing with these trip and fall hazards because it's not just about the city's exposure either. We're compassionate, and we've heard of some grievous injuries, and we want to be able to protect against those.
Well, and again, you know the figures better than I do, but 2.4 million asphalt. How much in terms of brick repair have you set aside in terms of the existing budget?
400. It's basically 400, but that is in the general fund. It's in the labor because we can't afford to hire outside crews. You saw on the slide, our brick crews are very, very efficient. They do an awesome job, and the quality we get, 5 or 10 years out of a brick repair that they do, and we get a year or 2 out of a contractor. So, but the problem is they can only do a half a mile a year.
Yeah.
Okay, so therein lies the problem. And so it's really embedded in the labor because there's, the concrete fines aren't that expensive and the brick is existing. And what we don't have, we get from Miller Yard. We reclaim what we don't use and save for future use. So the majority of the costs are in labor, and that's what we use our crews for. We've committed to 10,000 hours a year of brick repairs, of labor. And we've found that instead of doing the 5-man crew, it's more efficient to take the entire program, have them work together, shut down a portion of Livingston or a portion of Summerlin, and do that whole thing at once. We get a lot more bang for our buck that way.
And back to your point, the question is, what you've given me here is basically around $3 million. So we've got around $3 million either through asphalt or brick repair set aside. And what you need is $380 million, $360 million. So the answer, what you need is someplace between those two numbers is what you need.
And the truth is, we couldn't give out that many contracts anyway.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
It would be.
It costs us way too much money to even control that. But that's what I'm trying to look at is that
Right.
there is a number. We don't yet know what that number is, and so in working with the asphalt repair, we need to figure out what is a fair number that will continue to take care of what we have the needs, and as the 3 points per road come up, we need to make sure that we're kind of trying to maintain that difference. So,
Mayor, if I might.
Rebecca.
In the analysis that I showed you right at the beginning, if you go back to the first tab in your book and the last page of that, you'll see that we have a reduction of the gap that's associated with CIP fund balance funding and gas tax fund balance funding. When we start our budget process each year, we restore the full CIP contribution that we've traditionally had. That CIP contribution has been half, 50% for several years now, I think since 2010 maybe or 9. And so in this year we just feel like because of what you've heard with regard to streets and parks, that we cannot go another year with half of that there, but we did go to some fund balance that we've had in some funds to make the operating impact, the general fund impact, the same as it's been in past years, but that we're funding that at the larger number. So besides what they're talking about, we will have an additional $2 million for streets and $2 million for parks in this year's CIP over what we had last year. So I think it's not, as you say, $380 million or 60 or whatever, $60 million. It's not that large, but we are trying to make a concerted effort to get back to the levels that we've been in the past.
thank you.
Commissioner Sheehan.
Well, in that, now that we've arrived at that $400,000 number for bricks, and what's put aside every year, that's why I was so upset when we took $250,000 that was sitting in the budget away from brick, and I know it was because we hadn't had an assessment in a while. I wanted that to stay in brick repair, and instead it got moved to asphalt repair or construction or something like that. So that was the whole thing that came up. All right.
I'm sorry. That amount was dedicated funding for if, say, a portion of another street they wanted to reclaim. So Delaney, if they got 75% of their group and said, we want to reclaim this part that has been covered in asphalt.
Right.
That was capital. It couldn't be used for, it wasn't used for maintenance. That wasn't ever allocated for maintenance. That's what that number was for. It was a capital number. It wasn't the 400 that we're talking about is my staff's budget. It's not a number that's sitting out there like gas tax or CIP. It's literally labor. It's built into the salaries and benefits.
Right. But
okay.
But why can't you take, if you're not using it for reclamation,
Mm-hmm.
why do you have to use it for asphalt? Why can't you use it for brick?
I think that's a policy decision.
Yeah, and I'm a policymaker. That's why I'm asking the question. I'm not trying to be difficult.
No, I don't have the answer.
I know staff forget sometimes, and I'm a commissioner. Okay, I'm a policymaker,
No, ma'am.
and this is what policies. This is kind of what I'm here to do. I'm not here just to say yes all the time. I'm here to ask questions. So,
No,
from a policy standpoint, what I'm asking is, if we have funding set aside, and I don't mean to berate the staff. I'm just trying to get to an answer here in terms of how to get the resources that I need for my district. Byron?
I'm sorry. No, actually, because there are a couple of different elements. We weren't talking about quite the same programs. Part of it is we also added the Brick Street crew, I think the year that you're referring to. I'll get with you. Let's come over during the lunchtime, because I think we may be talking about a couple of different, there were different programs and different pots of money we may be
I'm just trying to get
about.
resources dedicated to a problem. When I see money taken away from bricks, or we say we have a big problem and it's being allocated for something else, I'm a policymaker. I should be able to ask questions about that.
I absolutely understand. What I'm saying is we added the Brick Street. If you remember, we didn't have the Brick Street crew, so we actually added some resources as well devoted to the Brick Street program, versus where we were outsourcing some as well. Also, what Lisa was referring to is the assessment process. So we had some dollars that were set aside. And I think we may be talking about the same one.
That's all I'm saying is I wanted it dedicated to.
But we haven't had the assessments come through at the same level as well. So that was more a reflection of folks, citizens are saying, on my street, I want to register, pay for my portion.
I understand it's not that I don't understand the program. All I'm saying is how we allocate the resources from a policy level. That's what I'm asking about, and that's what we can discuss later. Okay? Thank you.
Fair enough.
Okay, Jim, thank you. And Lisa, I love the spring-loaded manhole cover. That's awesome. Okay, we are going to recess for a lunch break, and we are just a little behind schedule, about 10 minutes. So would you guys prefer to come back at 1 or 1:15? Want to go through it?
Yeah, let's go through it.
Okay, then we'll reconvene at 1 o'clock.